Permitting ecological restoration projects under the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act is presented by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection Wetlands and Waterways Program and funded in part by a federal Clean Water Act Wetland Program Development Grant from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Hello and welcome. Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection is working to develop adaptive strategies to address climate change and integrate them into the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act regulatory framework. One such effort is to encourage wetland and restoration projects that further ecological connectedness and resilience, adaptation to sea level rise, and flood and storm damage protection for private property and public infrastructure. In October of 2014, MassDEP incorporated a general permit into the Wetlands Protection Act regulations that is designed specifically to ensure that restoration projects will be permitted. This presentation explores the regulatory additions implemented for the ecological restoration. It looks at what defines an ecological restoration project and what type of projects can be permitted as ecological restorations. And finally, we will walk through each step of the permitting process as an example. Several new additions enhance the regulations for ecological restoration projects. There are two new definitions added to 310 CMR 10.04. One is a definition of an ecological restoration project, and the second, a definition for ecological restoration limited projects. We've added 4 new sections for ecological restoration permitting in 310 CMR 11 through 310 CMR 14. New sections have been added to the coastal and inland limited projects regulations that deal with ecological restoration limited projects specifically. These can be found in 310 CMR 10.24.8 and 310 CMR 10.53.4. The Wetland Protection Act regulations now define an ecological restoration project as a project whose primary purpose is to restore or otherwise improve the natural capacity of a resource area to protect and sustain the interests identified in the Wetlands Protection Act when such interests have been degraded or destroyed by anthropogenic influences. Ecological restoration limited projects are those that specifically meet the eligibility criteria outlined in 310 CMR 10.24 Section 8 of the Coastal General Provisions, or the eligibility criteria outlined in 310 CMR 10.53 Section 4 of the Inland General Provisions. Ecological restoration projects do not include mitigation for the alteration of a resource area authorized by a final order of condition or a 401 water quality certificate. Ecological restoration projects do not include dredging projects for which a 401 water quality certificate has been issued pursuant to 314 CMR 9, unless the project is by definition an ecological restoration. Ecological restoration projects do not include natural disasters or acts of God or enforcement actions requiring restoration.
There are 6 ecological restoration project types that may be eligible for a general permit, also known as Restoration Order of Conditions. These include dam removal. This is an image of Amethyst Brook in Pelham before the dam was removed. And this is the same location on Amethyst Brook only 1 week after the dam was removed. Other types of ecological restoration projects include freshwater stream crossings, stream daylighting projects, culvert replacement projects to eliminate tidal restrictions, shellfish habitat restoration, and fish passage and rare species habitat restoration. There are several advantages for a wetland permit applicant to obtain an ecological restoration general permit. The Ecological Restoration General Permit, also known as the Restoration Order of Conditions, provides advantages for both conservation commissions and wetland permit applicants. For example, the general permit is a faster and more predictable permitting process because it identifies key issues for review, is front-loaded so all necessary information is already included with the notice of intent at the time of submittal to the Conservation Commission. It doesn't require a 401 water quality certification unless the project involves dredging. The restoration order of condition also includes standard template conditions for each of the specific ecological restoration project types. Another advantage of applying for an ecological restoration general permit includes an exemption from Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, or MEPA review, unless they are publicly funded. However, a notice still needs to be published in the Environmental Monitor before submitting the Notice of Intent to the Conservation Commission. Ecological restoration projects that meet the requirements of 310 CMR 10.12(1) and 2 are exempt from conducting a wildlife habitat evaluation under 310 CMR 10.60. It's important to note that there is an underlying principle for ecological restoration projects. It is understood that these kind of projects may result in the temporary or permanent loss of a resource area or the conversion of one resource area to another resource type when that loss is fundamentally necessary to achieve the project's ecological restoration goals.
We've developed a flowchart for the ecological restoration permitting process to emphasize its structure. The visual outline that a flowchart provides can help to clarify our understanding of the permitting process for restoration order of conditions and for ecological restoration limited projects. We'll use the flowchart to walk through each step of an NOI filing. First, to determine which permitting process a notice of intent should follow, the applicant must first decide if the project is an ecological restoration. This question can be answered by comparing the project to the regulatory definition found in 310 CMR 10.04, which defines an ecological restoration as a project whose primary purpose is to restore or otherwise improve the natural capacity of a resource area to protect and sustain the interest identified in the Wetlands Protection Act when such interests have been degraded or destroyed by anthropogenic influences. If the project does not meet the definition of an ecological restoration project, as defined in 310 CMR 10.04, then the NOI is a regular wetland filing and not an ecological restoration project. In that case, the applicant should file the Notice of Intent using the regular WPA Form 3 Notice of Intent. If the project meets the regulatory definition of an ecological restoration, then the NOI is an ecological restoration project. The next step in the permitting process is to determine if the ecological restoration project is eligible for a restoration order of conditions or whether it can be permitted as an ecological restoration limited project. So what criteria allow the project to be eligible for a restoration order of conditions? First, the project must be an ecological restoration project as defined in 310 CMR 10.04 as we've just discussed. It must further at least one of the interests of the Act. To the maximum extent practicable, the project must avoid and minimize adverse impacts to resource areas and other interests of the Act, and use erosion and siltation controlled best management practices to minimize construction impacts. The project will not result in a significant increase in flooding or storm damage affecting buildings, wells, septic systems, roads, and man-made structures or infrastructure. If the project involves dredging of 100 cubic yards of sediment or more, or dredging in outstanding resource water, the applicant must obtain a 401 water quality certificate pursuant to 314 CMR 9.00. The project will not substantially reduce the capacity of a resource area to serve habitat functions if carried out according to time-of-year restrictions and conditions on the project from the Division of Marine Fisheries for coastal waters and from the Division of Fish and Wildlife for inland waters. If the project is a freshwater stream crossing, it must be designed to meet the stream crossing standards. Tidal crossings must be designed to eliminate tidal restrictions to the maximum extent practicable. See 310 CMR 10.24 Section 10 for more details. The project does not include armoring of a coastal dune or barrier beach, a discharge of dredged or fill material to a certified vernal pool, or a point source discharge to an outstanding resource water. If the project is within rare wetland wildlife habitat, a written determination from the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program is required, indicating that either 1, the project will not have an adverse effect on specified habitat sites within the resource, or 2, that the project will be carried out in accordance with the Habitat Management Plan or Conservation and Management Permit approved by Natural Heritage.
If the project meets the definition for an ecological restoration project, and after reviewing the eligibility criteria in 310 CMR 10.13, we find that the project meets all of the criteria required for a restoration order of conditions, then the applicant, 1, would use the new Wetlands Protection Act Form 3A Notice of Intent to obtain a restoration order of conditions, also known as the general permit, and 2, follow the process outlined on the left side of the restoration flowchart and on the slides below. If the project meets the definition for an ecological restoration project, and after reviewing the eligibility criteria in 310 CMR 10.13, the applicant finds that the project does not meet all of the criteria required for a restoration order of conditions, then the ecological restoration project may still be permitted as an ecological restoration limited project. In that case, the applicant would, 1, use the regular Wetlands Protection Act Form 3 Notice of Intent, and follow the detailed permitting process on the right side of the flowchart and slides below. The restoration permitting flowchart is available on the MassDEP website. A link to web location is provided at the end of the presentation. This is the new WPA Form 3A, Notice of Intent, that should be used to file for a restoration order of conditions. This new form was designed using checklists that mirror the actions required in the regulations for restoration general permit projects. After identifying the correct form to file, projects eligible for a restoration order of conditions must complete the Ecological Restoration Project description in WPA Form 3A, Section C. This section includes a checkbox for each eligibility criteria listed in 310 CMR 10.13 as part of the project description, and sign the certification of eligibility in Section G. Projects that do not meet all the eligibility criteria required for restoration order of conditions may still be permitted as an ER limited project. In this case, the applicant should use WPA Form 3, Notice of Intent, and complete WPA Form 3, Section A7B. Then, as indicated in Section A7B, complete the ER Limited Project checklist in Appendix A. And on Appendix A, page 16, sign the certification of eligibility for ER Limited Projects. With the eligibility criteria checklists finished and certified, the next step in the filing process is to complete the required actions checklist. The required actions are listed in the regulations 310 CMR 10.11 and must be completed before submitting the Notice of Intent. To fill out the required actions checklist for a restoration order of conditions, complete Form 3A Section D and complete Form 3A Appendix 1. To fill out the required actions checklist for a restoration limited project, skip Form 3, Section C, and complete pages 10 through 14 in Appendix A. The required actions checklist in Appendix A replaces Section C of the Notice of Intent WPA Form 3. They cover the same material as Section C, but in more detail. The required actions include the following. Publish a notice in the Environmental Monitor. Obtain the appropriate determinations from the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, also known as NHESP. If the project is within the estimated habitat as shown in the most recent version of their estimated habitat map of state-listed rare wetlands wildlife. If the project requires NHESP review in the case of a restoration order of conditions, complete Form 3A, Section D. Complete Appendix 1, pages 14 to 18. For an ecological restoration limited project, skip Form 3, Section C, complete Appendix A, pages 10 to 14. If the project will occur within a coastal water body with a restricted time of year, as identified in Appendix B of the Division of Marine Fisheries Technical Report TR 47, entitled Marine Fisheries Time of Year Restrictions for Coastal Alteration Projects, dated April 2011, the applicant shall obtain a written determination from the Division of Marine Fisheries as to whether the proposed work requires a time of year restriction. And if so, the written determination shall specify the recommended time of year restriction and any other recommended conditions on the proposed work. For a restoration order of conditions, complete Form 3A, Section D, and complete Form 3A, Appendix 1, pages 14 to 18. For a restoration limited project, skip Form 3, Section C, complete Form 3, Appendix A, pages 10 to 14. If the project may affect a diadromous fish run, as identified in the Division of Marine Fisheries Technical Reports TR 15 through 18, dated 2004, the applicant shall obtain a written determination from the Division of Marine Fisheries as to whether the design specifications and operational plan for the project are compatible with the passage requirements of the fish run. For a restoration order of conditions, complete Form 3A, Section D, and complete Form 3A, Appendix 1, pages 14 to 18. And for a restoration limited project, skip Form 3, Section C, complete pages 10 through 14 in Appendix A. If the ecological restoration project involves dredging of 100 cubic yards or more in a resource area, or dredging of any amount in an outstanding resource water, the applicant must obtain a water quality certification pursuant to 314 CMR 9. The applicant must ensure that the project complies with all other applicable limited project provisions of 310 CMR 10.24 or 310 CMR 10.53. For a restoration order of conditions, complete Form 3A, Section D, and complete Form 3A, Appendix 1, pages 14 to 18. And for a restoration limited project, skip Form 3, Section C, complete pages 10 through 14 in Appendix A. Ecological restoration projects are exempt from having to conduct a wildlife habitat evaluation if it meets 310 CMR 10.12, 1 and 2. Lastly, collect all the documentation required during the process. Attach it all to the Notice of Intent and submit the application package to the Conservation Commission for review. For a Restoration Order of Conditions, complete Form 3A, Section E, pages 11 to 12. Complete Form 3A, Appendix 2, pages 19 and 20. And for an Ecological Restoration Limited Project, skip Form 3, Section D, pages 7 and 8, complete Form 3, Appendix A, pages 14 and 15. The minimum required documents to file with the Notice of Intent is listed in 310 CMR 10.12 and includes the Ecological Restoration Goals, the Ecological Restoration Project location, documentation of the project construction sequencing, maps of permanent alteration, rare species habitat, flood impact study for built environment, plan for controlling invasive species, natural heritage and endangered species written determinations, time of year restrictions or conditions, proof that notice was published in the Environmental Monitor, eligibility criteria certification, operation and maintenance plan for the infrastructure. The 401 water quality certification, if needed, information to show a stream crossing design meets requirements of 310 CMR 10.2410 for coastal or 10.538 for inland resource areas. Stream crossing baseline documentation. The stormwater report. For ecological restoration projects that meets all the eligibility requirements in 310 CMR 10.13, the Conservation Commission must issue a Restoration Order of Conditions. The Restoration Order of Conditions is a new form, WPA Form 5A. The Restoration Order of Conditions contains the general conditions 1 to 23 that are common to all orders of conditions and including stormwater. The Restoration Order of Conditions also contains conditions that specifically apply to each ecological restoration project type listed in the regulations. As with all orders of conditions, there is a section in the form for findings under the Municipal Wetlands Bylaw or Ordinance. However, there are no provisions for conservation commissions to attach special conditions under the State Wetlands Protection Act. Projects that meet the eligibility criteria set forth in 310 CMR 10.24.8 or 310 CMR 10.534 may be permitted as an Ecological Restoration Limited Project. Use WPA Form 5. Unlike the Restoration Order of Conditions, there is no requirement for a Conservation Commission to permit an Ecological Restoration Limited Project. The regulatory language gives Conservation Commissions discretionary authority. Requests for departmental action on Restoration Order of Conditions must be limited to claims that the applicant did not comply with one or more of the applicable procedural requirements of 310 CMR 10.05 and/or the Conservation Commission issued the General Order of Conditions even though the applicant failed to meet one or more of the applicable eligibility criteria. The request for department action shall specifically identify any procedural requirements and eligibility criteria that the person requesting departmental action alleges has not been met. The Conservation Commissions should use the normal Wetlands Protection Act Form 5 Order of Conditions for Ecological Restoration Limited Projects. For additional information, please contact Nancy Lynn at nancy.lynn@state.ma.us or Alice Smith at alice.smith@state.ma.us.